begin to be exposed, and we might even find out very soon where all this money actually went.
Let's go back now to the LIBOR scandal that happened in the wake of the 2008 economic collapse. LIBOR is an acronym that stands for London Interbank Offered Rate. And what we're finding is that these too big to fail banks are only appearing to be in competition with each other. The LIBOR scandal revealed that these guys are calling each other on the phone, colluding about how to rig their own interest rates so that one appears to be winning, one appears to be losing, but they're actually like branch offices of a single larger corporation. All of the apparent competition, oh, these guys' stock is going down, oh, it's a bloodbath. No. They're doing all this together. They're competing only on paper when in fact it's collusion. This is financial organized crime on such a massive scale. How can you arrest all the banks? They're too big to fail. This gets into a law that was passed in the United States in 1970 called the RICO Act, which stands for Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations. And that act was built to be able to take down massively organized crime. None of this really makes sense until you get back into the idea of the Federal Reserve System. Now, up until the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, the United States essentially was in control of its own currency. This same banking cartel that we've been talking about worked behind the scenes to create a series of fake economic crises in the late 1800s and early 1900s, which caused regular Americans to have their savings wiped out. This became such a crisis that people were desperately calling for reform. And then the government comes along and says, look, we're bribed, corrupt politicians. We don't really know what we're doing. They have spokespeople saying these kinds of things in the media. Let's bring in the investors. Let's bring in the British bankers, the people who really know how to make money. They've been doing it for a long time. They're not just going to hold an office for a few years and go disappear. They are the guys who really understand how to run a financial system. So what did we do? We handed over the issuance of American currency to a private corporation of private bankers. When you see Federal Reserve note on the US dollar, that means it's printed by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, since they came into power just over a century ago, has eroded the purchasing power of the US dollar by 99%. So what was really going on there? Do you think that these investors built up the equity of the United States, made us more profitable? It's exactly the opposite. We have been living in a prolonged economic depression. They just don't call it that because the metrics that we use to measure the economy are coming from a rigged system, just like we saw with LIBOR. Don't bother to look at the Dow Jones. Don't bother to look at the NASDAQ. That has nothing to do with the reality of everyone else and how hard it has become to earn a living. The complete wiping out of the middle class. You have rich and you have poor. And even among the rich, you then have super rich people where a concentrated small cluster of individuals have so much wealth that it could feed entire nations, entire peoples. So this is something that is an economic inequality that must be addressed. And the only way that we're ever really going to learn this is by a collective, massive understanding.
I say the elite powers in control, which is really the same as these central banking dynasties that are basically sitting over the nations. They are a form of global government, except that they are not government at all. They're just dominants. They are dominants. They are the ones that issue the orders to all the nations. As we saw clearly in 1947, after Roswell, we saw these elite powers in control issue these orders to all the nations that anything real that comes up in regards to alien visitors or UFOs must immediately be covered up at all costs, no matter what. And that was the first, that was how that wall, the embargo of truth, that Berlin Wall went up originally in 1947. And that's an example of them in action over the nations. And that's the reason why disclosure and the images that conjures up in our minds is not a real thing, really, because the nations, whether you're talking about the United States or any place else, they don't have the actual agenda of aliens to reveal. They're not on the inside of that. They really aren't. Nations just follow orders. That's all they do. And that's what they're doing now, and that's what they always do. And when you see them all doing something strange or something that seems out of the ordinary, it's because they're following the orders of the elite powers in control.
We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow. A new national pride will stir our souls, lift our sights, and heal our divisions. It's time to remember that old wisdom our soldiers will never forget, that whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots.
After the inauguration, the president signed a number of secret memorandums stating that he wanted the release of advanced technology, and a lot of this technology was involved in the space program, and he was very aware of it. We know that President Trump is aware of advanced technologies because his uncle was the one who went in and cleared out the safe of Tesla after his death. So we are fairly sure that President Trump grew up bouncing on his uncle's knee, hearing stories of free energy. Aside from the Secret Space Program Alliance, we have a different alliance. It is made up of all of these countries that have been fighting against this cabal for 50 years or so. It is also made up of various military groups that have broken away from the cabal, such as elements of the United States military intelligence groups have broken away and have been participating with a lot of other breakaway groups in trying to overthrow the cabal who took over the United States back in the 1960s, around 1963. This alliance, Earth Alliance, began to get more and more organized. And they got organized to a point to where some of them approached some generals and told them that they wanted to do an open coup in the United States. These generals decided they would make one last ditch attempt to get rid of the cabal legally. And that's when they approached Trump, allegedly, to run for president and allow them to legally get the country back, basically.
The alliance is an international group. It is a confederacy. There are lots of different factions, some of which agree, some of which do not agree. About the only thing that they all have in common is they want to see this satanic, pedophile, elitist cabal come down in flames. They do not want these people trying to kill off most of the planet, trying to control all of this immensely high technology. The alliance also consists of a surprising majority now of personnel in the U.S. military and in the U.S. intelligence community. So we're going to have to deal with the fact sooner or later, and probably sooner, that not everybody in the government is bad. This is part of the psyop that was put out through movies and through media to get us to completely distrust all levels of society, all of the institutions, so that no one will ever be able to oppose these people. You're not going to do this by a bunch of keyboard warriors on the internet. They're not going to actually take the solid action that needs to be taken. What you do need to see is what we now are counting up in August 2018 as 45,000 sealed indictments. Now, this is on the official U.S. government court record. You can go to the pacer.gov website, which lists all of the lawsuits and all of the indictments filed in all of the different districts in America, and just count up the sealed indictments. The official count, the undisputed count, is 45,000, and the normal number for any given year is approximately 1,000. Now, this is a very, very big story that people are really not seeing exactly how awesome this is. Let's talk about what do you have to do to get a sealed indictment. Okay, a sealed indictment is the result of a secret grand jury proceeding. Now, what is a secret grand jury? A secret grand jury requires a panel of 12 to 23 U.S. citizens who are then given information and testimony from a prosecutor. The prosecutor is prosecuting a particular individual who is not invited to the proceedings, has no idea this is going on. And in legal terms, that's called ex parte. So he or she is testified against by the prosecutor, and then the jury has to decide if there is sufficient cause to prosecute this person with a crime. In which case, they file a sealed indictment. The indictment stays off the record. You don't get to know the person's name until they unseal it, at which point the person is immediately arrested. And then they get to have the regular trial by jury with a judge. But you have to understand that the prosecutor is either a federal U.S. attorney, a county district attorney, or a state attorney general. These are big, big league players. This is not some attorney that you hire in Podunk, okay? These are major players creating major indictments. And the reason why they do it this way is that they're prosecuting organized crime. Typically, that's what it is. They're prosecuting a larger ring where they can't indict one person at a time. They have to get all their ducks in a row. They have to line it all up so that when they unseal the indictments, everybody gets arrested at once, and there's no ability for them to tip each other off that something happened so that the rats can flee off of the sinking ship. They all get nailed at once.
The phenomenon known as Q, or QAnon, came onto the scene at the very end of October 2017. And what essentially occurred is that a group that called themselves Q began posting on anonymous online image boards called 4chan and 8chan. And what they were posting was a lot of questions, a lot of suggestions, a lot of very interesting and intriguing data sets that essentially laid out a real-time takedown of the deep state by alliance and white hat groups behind the scenes.
As the QAnon briefings recently stated, these indictments are going to be like Watergate times 1,000. We've never seen anything like this in the history of the world. Some of the most recent QAnon briefings, which our insiders have told us is coming from the alliance, have said that there are many, many figures in the controlled mainstream media who are in these indictments as well. So Harvey Weinstein is just the beginning. And isn't it interesting that when Harvey Weinstein was finally arrested, in his hand he had the biography of Elia Kazan, who was a guy in early Hollywood history who was brought in during the McCarthy investigations and sang like a songbird and ratted out many other people in Hollywood. And Weinstein has now said he is doing the same thing and that everybody in Hollywood was doing the same stuff that he was doing. So he was upset about why he got singled out. So once these indictments become unsealed, this will be the fulfillment of the mass arrest scenario that I have been leaking on my website since 2009.
The only two indictments that we've had unsealed so far involved the cult group NXIVM, the founder of NXIVM, Keith Raniere, and one of his understudies, the actress Allison Mack. These are the only two unsealed court records so far. And their unsealed indictments actually labeled child sex trafficking on them. And NXIVM has found to be a hotbed of cult activity, of ritual abuse, and of child sex abuse even. So if these are the only two records that have been unsealed so far, and they are taking down names of this caliber with charges of this caliber, we can only imagine what the rest of these unsealed indictments are going to show us.
This is nothing new. It didn't start with the QAnon briefings, has nothing to do with who's president of the United States right now. This is a decades-long effort in the making, and they have tried and tried and tried in various ways to get this to work. They've had consistent failures, and now they're being much more systematic and much more methodical. It's all going to be done legally. All of the indictments are totally bona fide. And it's just that once this finally happens, it will be something we have never seen before in all of American history. A true second American Revolution.
One of the things I learned as an FBI agent is it's not that I learned to believe in conspiracies more. What I learned to know is when I am caught up in a river of deception and everybody else around me is being taken on the same current and we're all being taken in one direction, and suddenly one guy has to stick his head up and say, this isn't right, this is all wrong, we're all just being fed garbage and we're not being told the truth. Well, how is it that technology in today's age, our technology has moved forward by leaps and bounds in so many areas, yet we're still driving, the entire world is still driving automobile that function essentially on the same technology that they have for 100 years. 100 years, and we're still using fossil fuels to fill up our gas tanks. How is that possible? That has not moved forward hardly one iota. I mean, they blend the stuff sometimes, but I mean, essentially, technology has been stuck for 100 years. Well, that's because that's one of the economic factors from the globalists that is so dead set against distributing real energy, which is free energy, which we know was discovered during Tesla's time.
So Nikola Tesla is known, of course, for delving into free energy or zero-point energy sciences, but funny enough, near the end of Nikola Tesla's life, he was actually delving into anti-gravity research. And unfortunately, Tesla didn't have enough time nor money towards the end of his life to be able to continue his research into anti-gravity, but he passed along his knowledge to a man named Otis Carr. And funny story about that, Nikola Tesla was staying in a hotel in New York near the end of his career. And during his stay at this hotel, he befriended one of the workers that was there, and that was Otis Carr. And they courted a relationship, and Nikola Tesla actually felt comfortable enough to begin sharing some of his research with Otis Carr. Now, Otis Carr then went, after Nikola Tesla's passing, to develop this research out a little bit more so, and Otis Carr actually developed what was called the OCT-X1, I believe, and it was actually a flying saucer craft that was piloted with the consciousness of the individual, and he did, supposedly, actual experiments that were successful in navigating both space and time with this craft. So we could say Otis Carr actually was the first person to develop begin to develop a civilian-based space program. But he was essentially run out of business and was not able to continue the work he was doing because the military-industrial complex suppressed his work.
But the same forces that destroyed that, I mean, at that time, supposedly it was Thomas Edison, who was a part of the global system. I mean, he was the original fossil fuels and normal electricity system, and he was just a front man to destroy Tesla and destroy his because the efforts to destroy his patents came from national government, not just Edison and his private conglomerate that had billions of dollars even at that time. And the reason for that is why? Because this effort to repress free energy was coming from the elite powers in control, the ones that sit on top of everybody and tell everybody, we got to stop this. And what we're seeing today, of course, is that free energy is like a dam that they're sprouting leaks, and it's getting ready to burst forward because it is coming, and it's coming really soon because it's been out there for so long. And I think we're getting to the point where it is going to come forward, and it's going to come forward maybe from several sources at the same time because the pressure has built up so much from so many different sources. So I think we are going to get it very soon.
I was asked to give a paper at Vandenberg Air Force Base to the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And their normal request would have been, tell us how you're trying to get new business using advanced technology. In other words, that was my job, to run